Quote is always, what's more important in 2023, chat GPT-4 or GLP-1? And I say it's GLP-1. This is a life-changing set of drugs that not only is it going to help healthcare dramatically because you're going to reduce obesity, beyond that, perhaps even more important is people's psychology. But I'll tell you, having spent 15 years on Wall Street, I was an MD at JP and Morgan Stanley. I can tell you the stocks of Walmart and McDonald's have gone down.
This is one of the more exciting business models I've heard in a while.
It's a really interesting model, but we can spool someone up in under 24 hours.
Wow,
If you're excited about this kind of opportunity as a med spa owner, as an entrepreneur, as any health adjacent area, if you're a dentist, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, a personal trainer, and you have extra space, you turn us on and you start monetizing that space. I can take my space, put a couple chairs in there, and now I start renting it out to a super high margin business. Our providers make $200-$300 an hour. And I can go through the math with you. It's really simple.
Yeah, please, come on. I mean, now I'm like,
yeah.
I'm trying to salivate here a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let's do the math.
Live. And you know what? We were just talking about these GLP-1 classified drugs. Is that right, Iggy?
Yeah, that's right. That's the semaglutides, the tirzepatides, all these obesity drugs, but really they're miracle drugs. My quote is always, what's more important in 2023, chat GPT-4 or GLP-1? And I say it's GLP-1. I think this is a life-changing set of drugs. If you read the literature on it, it is changing the world. Not only is it going to help healthcare dramatically because you're going to reduce obesity and all the other things that come with it, COPDs, joint problems, but you're also going to help with kidney disease, heart disease, substance abuse, alcoholism, all these things. And so not only is it helping human beings and the cost of the healthcare system, which is fantastic. We could reduce that cost and spend those resources elsewhere. But beyond that, perhaps even more important is people's psychology, because people have been suffering from these problems and they have felt badly about themselves. They've had bad psychological effects. I am a weak person because I'm heavy, I'm overweight, I'm obese. I am a weak person because I can't resist alcohol. I am a weak person because I am addicted to this drug. And that is just not true now. This is proven. Just like you could say you're a weak person because you have schizophrenia. Yeah, because you have a mental disease. That's just not true. Nobody would say that. That's horrible. Mm-hmm. But if they've done studies now where you just say, hey, if you take these salts and you inject them and eventually in the oral form, you have no desire to do these things. None of these, all these things are largely eliminated. Nothing's 100%, but largely eliminated. And it tells you this is just a neurological problem. I have a different neurological makeup, a circuitry in my brain that makes me want to do something, and it doesn't mean I can't stop it. People that have that can stop it, but it's such a large tax to do it. And we all know that. I think it's been proven too that if you have a lot of things going on in your life, you tend to slide on other things, whether it's drinking or weight or whatever. But if you can concentrate on the problem, you solve it. Well, what if there was a drug, and now there is, these semaglutides and tirzepatides, to be able to say, we're going to disconnect that circuit. So you don't want to eat. You'll see food and you're like, eh. I had a sister-in-law who, I remember the first time I saw her at Thanksgiving. And I had a big heaping plate of turkey and stuffing and cranberry sauce, just gluttonous. And she has this plate with a couple
typical pieces. Thanksgiving attitudes.
Yeah. Just a couple of things on it. And I just looked at her. I said, are you not hungry? And this is great food. And she said, yeah, I just don't like to eat. And I was like, whoa, I just can't even wrap my brain around. You don't like to eat? No, and so she's on the other end of the spectrum. So can you imagine that's the way you felt? Because I know how I feel when I go for seconds or maybe when I was younger, thirds. But by the time you say you go, I don't want to eat anymore. I'm just stuffed like the bird. I just want to sit down in front of a football game. Imagine if that's the way you felt neurologically on the first plate. That's kind of what they're doing, the sense of fullness. They're changing the neural circuit, and they're like, I don't want to eat, so I'm going to eat 500 less calories during the day. And 500, it seems like that's not a huge change. 500 calories, you do it for every day, you're going to lose like 50 pounds. You're going to lose like 50 pounds. I mean, it's a huge, huge difference. So I feel like that's going to change. And then people are like, your joints, your feet, your back, all your musculature, your activity levels will go up. I mean, it's just an unbelievable feedback loop. And then you're not drinking, maybe you're not smoking. The hospitals might be empty.
Man, look, as of right now, I would say in the US, we need all the help that we can get. And this is going to be a really fun conversation. And I wanted to just dive into it because we were talking offline and we were talking about just like how this industry has some crazy opportunities right now. Healthcare as a whole, because we have all those challenges, I feel like present some really phenomenal opportunities. And it's great to really just have this conversation with you, Iggy. Iggy is the actual founder of CloudMedSpas, and what you're doing to help healthcare owners really run a better practice. I want to talk about because at least from lots of my clients, lots of the actual listeners, they are private practice owners, and through school, most of them are PTs and people that are doing regen medicine type of work, and they weren't taught business a lot. Like this is a brand new world for them a lot of times. And so, man, I think this is going to be great for us to dive into. And when you look at these opportunities with some of these drugs out here, I almost take a step back and think, okay, ChatGPT did wonders for what's happening in like tech. Lots of people are saying that if that technology didn't come about, our whole economy would look a lot different. Lots of the stocks would have dropped like crazy. But this is something that is a game changer for a lot of companies, right? Like it's going to be probably in a lot of things, almost everything.
You're talking about the GLP-1s.
Well, I was talking about ChatGPT, but then I was going to transition right into the actual GLP-1s and just thinking about that, just because you mentioned how we don't fully understand how to network everyone together through the internet just yet. I mean, that's still happening, right? But GLP-1s, we don't fully understand the mind yet. Like we understand the body, but the mind is brand new open space. So yeah.
Oh yeah. No, 100%. But I'll tell you, having spent 15 years on Wall Street, I was an MD at JP and Morgan Stanley. I can tell you the stocks of Walmart and McDonald's have gone down because of this. And Walmart has particular insight. There was an article that came out a couple months ago, and they have a pharmacy, and they're I think they're the single biggest grocer in America.
Yeah.
And they can correlate anonymized data, but people that are on this set of glutides or semi-glutides and their shopping habits, and I'm going to get the number wrong, but they're either their calories in the basket, their shopping baskets are down 17%.
Wow.
People are eating less that are on this drug, and they can see it in the data. I mean, it's amazing. So Walmart's gone down because we're going to have less sales. McDonald's has gone down. I believe the soft drink makers have gone down. And guess what? Some of the interesting ones are the airlines have gone up. Because the industry estimated that in 10 years, they will save $500 million as an industry on fuel because people will be lighter.
We'll be weighing less.
Exactly.
That's
so you save 200 people, but weigh on average 5 pounds, 10 pounds less. That's a ton less weight on the plane.
That's a really different take than what I was thinking that you would say about Walmart, man. But they would have that data. They would know, if anybody knows. Just think about all the insight that they have on their shoppers there. And I was with this one doc up in Cary, North Carolina. He's a bariatric surgeon, Dr. Bruce, and he's been just pumping out a ton of Ozempic. He can't keep it in his shelf. Like anytime he has an ad for it, it's gone, right? Like people are calling up nonstop. So, it's one of these things where I think that people are looking for it now. Like people are knowing how to go about calling around to the doctor and asking for it. The market demand is there. The healthcare providers are going to offer it,
Well, so that's where you've teed me up perfectly. So one of the things we're going to be offering to all of our providers, actually anyone on the planet, is the ability to get these drugs, not the name brand drugs, but through a compound pharmacy. You'll have to go through a telehealth consult with an endocrinologist because we want to do it right. We want to get a prescription. The group we're working with is supported by Bob Redfield. He's the former CDC commissioner. So it's totally above board. It's not one of these online sketchy things. We don't want to do that. It's going to get it to people at less than a third the price of the name brand drugs.
Wow.
And I can't speak to legally to its relative effectiveness, but it has the same basic ingredients. And so far, the results are equally as impressive.
All right, Iggy. So we got to press in a little bit here, and you could tell me, hey, I'm not touching that part of it, but cut me off at any moment. But when we look at, why do you choose to have your own in-house compounding? Is it more so? Is that
Well,
being
no, we don't
outsourced?
have a compounding. We're working with compound farms that are all NABP. They're all
Gotcha.
certified and from the National Accounting Board of Pharmacies. So we're working with third-party compounding pharmacies. We're not doing it. We're
Got
just working on exposing this to our providers, our clients, really anyone that works with us, and say, hey, here's an opportunity to get this out to people. And there is a window here of at least a year or two where, because the drug is in such high demand and there's such scarcity, compound pharmacies have a window in which they can produce these salts.
Ah, okay. Got it. Because this drug is in such high demand, and help me get educated here in the audience, is one of those things where if it wasn't in such high demand, then they would have to turn to that actual main name brand because they have the patent for that drug. Is that?
Yeah. Typically, that's the way it goes. And there are a few other exemptions, like if the ingredients are not exactly the same and you have different substrates and things like that. So there's other ways. I'm not a lawyer, but there are apparently other ways. You can do some research online. But certainly now, I think it was as of May, I want to say May, maybe it was June, a government body, I want to say the FDA, but I'm not sure. The government body came out and said they're in such short supply that this exemption is now open.
I think that's awesome. I think it's going to do wonders for the actual general population, because I'm always thinking like this too. Okay, when someone has access to this type of life-changing type of drug, then there's other life changes that are going to happen. What's some things that maybe you guys are thinking about that might be that ripple effect that might take place?
Yeah. Well, in our industry, I want to talk a little bit about CloudMedSpa, but what we're seeing the trends we're seeing are on the, what I'll say, less work is there's less interest in body sculpting. Makes sense. The body sculpting devices. But there's more interest in skin laxity treatments. So micro needling, laser, intense pulse lasers, a little more interest in laser hair removal because people probably are a little more comfortable with their bodies being out there. And I certainly expect, I can't say I haven't seen or have seen it. I haven't looked at the data closely enough, but I would expect fillers to start rising. Because as you get skin laxity in the face, you're going to want to fill it out as you lose weight. I have heard doctors even say, once you reach a certain age, and I'm in that category above 60, being just a little bit heavy may make you look a little younger because you just lose the collagen and other things in your face. So having a little extra fat makes you look a little bit younger. So fillers, I expect to rise. I don't know what it'll do, but a Botox, probably it'll make it better, higher, because you'll have more wrinkles from more lines from less weight. So you want to tighten those up. Yeah. So I think that generally speaking, and people use, I think aesthetics can be trivialized. But I have such a great story. When I had a startup in San Francisco, I had the great fortune of having Laura Carstensen. I'll mention her name. She is a Stanford professor of psychology. She's been there at least 25, 30 years. She ran the department, and she's also the founder and I believe still director of the Center of Longevity. And I had a startup in the aging space in healthcare, and she was kind enough to serve on our board. We ended up selling the company that ended up getting sold to Best Buy. Told her about this idea I was doing in aesthetics, and I must admit I was very sheepish. I thought she'll probably think it's somewhat frivolous, and she said the exact opposite. She said, "You got to understand, when people." She was a psychology professor. She said, "What you're doing is liberating them." Just like I was talking about the psychology of the GLP. She said, people, when they lose weight, when they get a facial treatment, when they get a Botox, 5% of the people they know will notice. maybe 10, maybe not even their spouse.
Yeah.
But what they do notice is themselves in the mirror. They know that their clothes are a little looser, their face looks a little better, the things are gone, and they're like, oh, I feel so much better about myself. I'm going to go out into the world with a more positive attitude. And you are engaging that with these treatments. It's not so much for others, it's for your mind. It's putting you in a better frame of mind.
That makes a lot of sense to me because for years I was a personal trainer, especially throughout college and whatnot. And you watch people come alive as they're dropping weight, like their whole posture changes, partly because now they're building up some muscle mass and everything else. But a lot of it was just psychology. It was just like you start to open up, and that's really what I experienced as one of the reasons why I even got into that space, because I went through my own transformation. And once you do that, you're like, okay, if I can do this, I think I can probably access some other things as well, right? And then start going down that whole rabbit hole, man. You know what? Let's talk about your business, though.
Yeah. We sidetracked, but our business is really. There's another origin story for that, which is fun.
Let's go.
I was watching back 5-6 years ago when I lived in the Bay Area. We used to sit down with friends and we would watch the Super Bowl and we would watch the Oscars, and we'd switch places. The guys and the gals kind of switch places. Anyway, we're watching the Oscars. And it's one of those anniversary shows, and they're showing like 75 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago. And it didn't take a rocket scientist. People making comments about teeth and skin and hair and such. And I just looked at it, oh my God, look at this. There's this very clear, obvious, that I should have figured out before, trend of what is the bar, not just in Hollywood, but in society for your personal aesthetic. And it just takes off. The personal trainers, that didn't exist 50 years ago, right? Botox didn't exist 30 years ago, believe it or not. 30 years ago, Botox didn't exist. So it just is a one-way street. And at the same time, I'm watching a young adult take a selfie of themselves. And I was like, oh, this is unbelievable. These kids take 100 times more photos now than I did when I was their age. And I was like, that is just going to put a tremendous amount of scrutiny. And there's pluses and minuses to that, but you are going to evaluate yourself, right? And this Zoom meeting is another example. You are evaluating yourself all the time. It's like looking in a mirror all the time. You are going to be critical eventually. So I was like, this trend is going up. It's going to get younger. I looked at the numbers. It was unbelievable. So I explored things like hair care, and personal trainers is actually one of the interesting ones, teeth and medical aesthetics. And the three that jumped out in a weird way, but I looked at the stats in hair care, personal trainers there, medical aesthetics, and hair care. I looked at hair care in 2018, and it looked at in 2018, more than 90% of the physical locations that sold hair care had no employees. They were just renting chairs to stylists.
Okay.
And you've probably seen Solo Salon Suites or My Salon Suites in Phoenix. Those are examples of it. But even regular mom and pop said, this is a stupid game. I put out the marketing dollars, whether it's Yellow Pages or local advertising or TV or whatever it happens to be. The patients come in and then they develop a relationship like they do in personal training with the person that they're dealing with the stylist. And if the stylist decides to move down the street or across town, the customers usually go with them.
That's right.
And so it's like, well, this, you're a businessman. Like, well, this makes no sense. Customer acquisition cost is borne by me, but the lifetime value travels out the door with the practitioner. So the hair salon said, uncle, I'm out. I'm just going to rent you the chair. These are your customers, not mine. I'm not going to bother marketing to acquire them. And I said, this exact same thing will happen in medical aesthetics. Exact same thing. Now, it's a much more complicated nut to crack because you have state licensing, you have neurotoxins, which are a controlled substance, you have malpractice insurance, you have medical directors, you have vendor relationships. But if you could put together that platform and of suite and services, software, I think you got a winner. And I think for the bottom 90%, and that's what it is, 2 to 3 locations and lower, maybe not the Ideal Images, or Skin Spirits of the world, but the bottom 90%, the subscale spas, this is a much better solution. You don't have HR problems. And by the way, I've talked to the big guys. They'll tell you that the biggest problem they have is HR. They hire people. The great ones have a huge book of business. They want to leave. How do we keep them? The bad ones, they don't show up on time. They miss appointments. They anger customers. They want to get rid of them, and there's an HR problem. And then you guys, some in the middle that are get by. Hey, you're just like, wait a second, what are we doing? This is a Sisyphean task. We're going up the mudslide. Like, we should just say, let's rent it out. So we have the software and services. That's what CloudMedSpa is. We have two of our own. Because when I did it, I thought there's got to be a lot of people interested in this idea, but I didn't market. I couldn't find any, or one tiny one in Scottsdale. I go, let's build our test kitchen, prove the concept out. We did that in Boston. It does work. We have dozens and dozens of providers renting space, buying our products, getting scale pricing, because we're a bigger and bigger and bigger entity, doubling or more each year. And we get better and better prices. And we pass that wholesale price on to our clients. So they get the advantages of scale. They get a community of providers that they can bet. We just opened Slack channels a little while ago. They can communicate with each other. They get training if they need it. We have devices in there. We work with 2 or 3, I'd call them forward-thinking device manufacturers who are willing to work on a subscription basis, not a lease, not a purchase, but hey, for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, whatever, you get this machine, and if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, and you can return it undamaged, but used. And that's a win-win-win. That aligns interests. I mean, in a weird way, that's my business model. Is how do we align interests? Because it felt the model like hair care was aesthetics is this disalignment or misalignment, I should say, of interests between the provider and the patient. And I'm like, let's align everybody. Patient gets a good service, provider gets a great cut, a bigger and a fair share cut, and then the owner, the med spa owner, doesn't cover the burden of marketing and HR for bad people. They just are a landlord, and they're just a conduit. And you're like, everybody's aligned. And people say, well, you're not vetting the providers. How do you know you're bad providers? And I said, well, I've learned in the 21st century that top down is worse than bottom up. It's not perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of very good. But we have realized in the world, tech has proven it, marketplaces are better than dictation, the dictatorial top-down regulation. So we're saying, I know, or this person knows who are the good ones. Guess what? If the patients go to this provider, maybe they're pretty good. And if the patients don't like that provider and they fail, maybe they're pretty bad. So let the marketplace decide. And maybe it doesn't matter that they're Da Vinci with a needle. Maybe what's important is they're good enough with a needle and they have great bedside manner and that they make their patient feel good about themselves. And they're on time and they answer questions. I don't know what the mix of skills and communication is to be a sought after provider. I think I know, but the marketplace knows better than me. And that's why I say that idea of you're not vetting providers is such an old fashioned 20th century view.
Man, this whole your model speaks to where I personally believe the market is going as well. Naval's book, where he talks about leverage and he talks about leveraging, media and opposed to capital and then hiring up a ton of folks. And he has this line that he really talks about in the book about how he believes everyone's going to go back to being entrepreneurs, kind of how we were originally, right? If you take us back to caveman style, like, yeah, you had some hierarchy a little bit there, but it was very tribal. So you found your actual niche groups that you were in. And you can have only but so many people in that tribe, right? Because we couldn't handle too much of that. But everybody was their own business owner for the most part. You took care of your house. You hunted in a group, sure. So everybody was aligned, right? Exactly what you're saying. And I just it's hard to see us not everyone, but the far majority. I mean, like, especially in healthcare, the far majority. It's hard to see how less than 75% of the market is not going to say, hey, you know what? There's ways that I can access the things that I would normally do in these corporate institutions. I could do on my own with that same flexibility, and I could do it on my own terms, my own time. And it's just hard not to see the market going this way, man. I think that's spot on, because healthcare needs people that are passionate about healthcare, but also allows them to kind of have that, have that art that they want to put into the science, right?
Well, it's funny. You're a smart man. So there's an economist by the name of Frank Coase, Coase. He wrote a paper in 1920 about the firm, the organization. He didn't win a Nobel Prize, but I believe it's because he died. So you have to be alive when you get a Nobel Prize. And anyway, he wrote, or he shouldn't say just wrote, because it wasn't an opinion piece. He proved mathematically, and it could be refuted, but he proved mathematically that the only advantage of a firm, of an organization, was transactions costs. That you could reduce transactions costs by having it all in-house. Today's world with the internet, interconnectedness, individual software, we use 18 different software company, little vendors for pieces.
Sure.
And then finally, I think you got to point to Amazon and AWS, how they made that system completely an API. Everybody inside Amazon had an API relationship. They followed that principle that, and if you take it to its logical extent, unless there are massive scale advantages to overcome the bureaucracy, the transactions costs are almost zero now. So it does push the economic world to be individual proprietors, individual LLCs.
Yeah. I mean, man, knowing that you have experience in like Wall Street and knowing that you've been in healthcare now for how many years now, Iggy? I mean,
I've had two different startups. I had one healthcare startup from 2012 to 2016. And I took a break for, I guess, a year or two. And then I started this in 2018. So it's been pretty much on for the last decade plus. Yeah.
Love it. Love it, man. Within that decade, you had enough moments to understand how crazy this world can be, with different ways to kind of scale out these businesses. And yeah, I would just love to hear how you guys plan to build up this platform now. I mean, because I think it's needed in every major market. And obviously you're in Boston, but what's the whole vision and plan to go to market and bring it nationwide?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Podcast is an interesting methodology for it. So we had planned, this was the summer of 21. And I did a couple of podcasts. We had planned on doing the software version 2023. So we'll come out with it in January 2023. And we did a couple of podcasts with what I'd say big podcasters in the aesthetic space, Aesthetic Records podcast, Grant Stevens podcast, and then Terry Ross. And we got dozens of folks calling us up, say, hey, how do I franchise this? How do I get that model? Yeah. And we're like, shit, we need to accelerate this. And so by, I guess this time, a little more than October of last year, we started it, we offered it, and we had perfected it ourselves. Like I said, we did it that way, architected it. So we were just an internal client. All our software, our 2 locations were just outlets of our software. And we launched it. And now we have 13 other locations from Atlanta. It's Alpharetta, actually. To North Carolina, to several in Boston, one in New Jersey, Chicago, and Beverly Hills. And I would think we'll get another 15 to 20 in 2024. And now that we're also offering this semaglutide option, I think it is such an incredible, it's not even an arrow, it's like a bazooka in their quiver to generate leads and then therefore revenue for themselves and other options for their providers. And to have a full suite of tools for your patients if you're a provider, like you can offer this too. Now they go through the system, they talk to the endocrinologist. The provider doesn't even need to be involved whatsoever in the medical process. Really? I would encourage them to go in and because this is their patient and make sure they're doing well, but they're not medically responsible because they're not making the prescription out. The endocrinologist is, and as these things are self-injected. And it's not required for these folks to be involved, but these are their patients, hopefully, or maybe their friends even. Honestly, you don't, since they're not medically responsible, it doesn't have to be a patient. It could be someone who's just has a weight problem that's serious, diabetes, and they give them this option. Okay, go fill this out, get these products for under $300 a month, $300 a month, and change your life, hopefully.
One, even that price point's a lot less than what I've heard that some of the name brands are. I mean, I think I've heard double, if not almost 2.5 times that much. So when we think about like people that are interested in really being a part of your business, say, hey, you know what, I'm interested in CloudMed. Seems like this is the right place for me. Do you have to be someone that is a licensed healthcare provider to actually be a part of that franchise? Or please.
No,
let's
the
talk about that
one.
model. Yeah.
So we have doctors we have dentists,
Okay.
we have nurses, and we have just entrepreneurs who, because at the end of the day, you're just a landlord.
Yeah.
If you are just providing space and you are using our system, each individual provider that comes into your space and uses it, we require that they have malpractice insurance. We require they have a medical director if it's legally necessary in their state. Each state has slightly different licensing requirements. For example, Massachusetts, a nurse practitioner can practice now. There was an exemption for COVID, and the nursing board is strong, and they pushed it through as a permanent thing. So if you're a nurse practitioner, you don't need a medical director. You're experienced enough. Some states like Texas, nurse practitioners do need a medical director. We say if you need a medical director, given your accreditation, you have to provide the documentation. If you need malpractice, and then you have to also check the box, opt in that you have the training, you have the blah, blah, blah. So you've now committed fraud 3 times unless you can do all those things. We basically say, okay, this person has the training, has the medical director, has the insurance, they're renting space from you. You are a landlord. It's like a hotel. And we deal with the products directly. So the landlord is really just a consigner. They don't take legal possession of the products. They're a consigner on the transaction. So they're not involved in the products. It's a really interesting model, one that's been vetted. And we're really excited. We have medical directors in each state where we operate that are affiliated with our company so that we are allowed to ship to those states. So there's that legal requirement.
Wow.
We follow it. But we can spool someone up in under 24 hours.
Wow.
If you're excited about this kind of opportunity as a med spa owner, as an entrepreneur, as any health, I'm going to call it health adjacent area. If you're a dentist, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, maybe a personal trainer, and you have extra space, you turn us on and you start monetizing that space. And other analogies Airbnb people have used. It's like, I can take my space, put a couple chairs in there, and now I start renting it out to a super high margin business. Our providers make $200 to $300 an hour with their patients. And I can go through the math with you. It's really simple.
Yeah, please come on. I mean, now I'm like,
I'm
trying to salivate here a little bit.
Well, let's do the math. So if you know the aesthetics area, you can do a neurotoxin treatment. Let's call it a Dysport or a Xamin treatment for in about 15 minutes. Maybe sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 20, even with consultation. The treatment itself will cost you $400 to $500 for the patient, depending on number of units and where it's done. And then the cost of that neurotoxin is roughly 40% of the treatment price. So just for simple math, let's say you do 2 treatments in an hour, which is very easy to do. That's 2 times 500 is $1,000. The neurotoxin costs you $400. So you're netting 600. And by the way, we're building that out right now. Right now, they're using third-party apps, but we're building it into our app. You would literally just charge the patient their credit card or their bank information. You get the money as the provider.
Wow. You
have bought the product. Oh, yeah, no, we're not involved in the transaction. They're independent LLCs. It's like the hair care thing, if they're renting the chair. So they get $1,000, they pay $400 for the product. They rent the chair for the hour for $99. That's $500 an hour. 501 exactly in that case. That's in their pocket. Now they have things like marketing costs potentially, unless they're very clever about free social media. But they can spend money on marketing. They probably need to do a medical director. That's a monthly fee of a few $100s. They need insurance, but malpractice in this category, it's generally around $100 a month. If you have a few dozen patients a month, which is they're coming in every 3 months, you probably have 100 patients. You're making $100,000 working 10 hours a week.
Man, the part that is really exciting about this is for one, the actual opportunities for the healthcare providers to make good money, where a lot of times, sometimes they have these larger scale operations that just churn and burn through people, right? And that's the model. They like bring you in as somebody that's young, fresh out of school, and we'll just beat the crap out of you up until you say mercy, and then you branch off and do your own thing. But even for the actual landowners, or people that have the building, that have the actual like practice already, where they can have an open room. Because I always thought that was a massive opportunity. I would go into these different clinics, and some of them would just buy a ton of space, right? Now you have a couple extra rooms that are pretty much never being used, and they try to find new people to kind of come in, and someone's coming in and out always. But to turn that into something that could be a cash cow, I mean, to me, is just a massive opportunity for a lot of practices that are just sitting on valuable real estate.
Yeah. And now commercial real estate, people can just go out and say, hey, I can get real estate cheap. And the break-even utilization rates are single digits. Because if you're renting out space at $99 an hour, you only need to rent it about 5% of the time in most locations, other than Rodeo Drive or something, or Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be there. You don't need to be there. You know, you can be on the fringes, even in big cities, in the fringes in New York, even. I don't even mean that far away, like in the 30s or something. Like, it's not a big deal, you know, in the Second Avenue, you could have a location and break even renting out a room just 1 or 2 hours a day.
I'm really curious. Man, and you're gonna have to tell me once we get pretty close here, because I know we got to run in like a little bit, man. But I'm just listening to your model, and I'm getting pretty excited. So you have to cut me off at some point. But when I think about it, like, I was in, of all places, Columbus, Georgia. This was like a week and a half ago, and I was down there visiting actual practice. Beautiful practice, not what you would think that would be in Columbus, Georgia. I'm sure it had to be one of the nicest private practices out there. I'm talking to the actual doc, and he has a couple rooms open. I'm just thinking, man, now that you're talking, I think the Warriors probably have a massive opportunity for this, for that 1 or 2 places. Because if you go into Atlanta and you're into like the major zip code, you'll have some pretty tough competition out there. But in some of these other areas, you're just like, you're like the big fish in like a small pond, I would imagine. Are you guys seeing that as well?
There. Both of them work. I'll just be honest with you. If Columbus, you got the nicest spot and it's very envied, there's going to be a lot of practitioners who probably would say, shit, I'd love to be able to use that space. Price it accordingly, everybody wins. But also in Atlanta, though, you probably have so many practitioners, people that have started working with us and are opening a new space. We have plenty of those. They say to me, well, where should I put it? Like off to the side, not near other med spas. I said, no. The exact opposite.
Yeah, it's true.
It's going to be right in the middle, because those 25 med spas, they probably each have 5 to 10 employees. That is a target-rich environment. You've got 200 potential renters sitting right there. You want to be in a relatively modest, not cheap, but well-priced, clean, healthy space. And now you provide these rooms and chairs, and then we basically do the rest. And you attract some providers, and there's a lot of ways to do it: open houses, vendor events, social media, Indeed ads, whatever. And you get a critical mass going, and you can create an opportunity for passive income.
That's a great point, man, because this is a little bit different than some other categories where you're worried about that person down the street that has the big dollars. And I always think that's the backwards thinking with marketing too, because you almost want to piggyback, just like Wendy's does with McDonald's, right? You want to go across the street, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm right down the street, but you want to be within that same zip code.
It seems like. In your case, it's not like you're not fighting for the patients; you're fighting for the employees.
That's right.
And so you don't. If an employee has decided to work at a place, they probably are renting or own a house or an apartment nearby. They're not like in some terrible thing. They might be, but most people are funny. And when they say, we're thinking of moving our offices, let's do a survey of employees. And if you do it, you literally realize everybody's already self-selected for being close to the office. So you don't want to, you want to be right in the thick of it. And then you can say that way it's really easy for an employee to just say, I don't have to go 10 miles. I can just go 3 blocks. And my patients, and now non-competes are really falling down in most states. I mean, they're California, Massachusetts, they don't exist. And non-solicits are a complete moot point now because of social media. I don't have to write a letter to my patients or call them up and solicit them, maybe break a clause in my contract. All I do is post on social media. I'm allowed to post, hey, I'm at this new place, CloudMedSpa XYZ in Atlanta, Georgia. I'd love to see you. You know,
easy.
It's easy.
Yeah, I mean, and no, this makes a lot of sense. I think the model is going to be really interesting, and it's going to be difficult to really see people not gravitating towards this whole format, especially as healthcare providers and even people that just have that extra room because real estate's gotten a little weird right now, especially in that whole people don't want to do like long-term leases and all the rest of that
Right.
if they don't have to, especially out the gate. And so if we take it out 5, 10 years, just I know we're talking about a lot of things that are just hard to
Yeah.
like at
Yeah.
least see coming.
Yeah.
I would love to hear though, like where do you see this going 5, 10 years from now?
Well, the beauty in this case is I don't have to do a lot of prognostication because you have the data in the Bureau of Labor Statistics for haircare. 90% of the establishments, a little more than 50% of the sales. So it does stand to reason the supercuts are still, the big gorillas, and they're still
Sure.
doing more volume per space. But 92% of locations have no W-2 employees. They just rent the chair. I could see a similar situation because it's more lucrative. It's a little more difficult legally, but I could see a similar situation where half of the sales of all aesthetics go to rental-based models. And in our case, we're not trying to own the brand. We thought about franchising. The legal and the resource requirements are pretty significant to police that, to maintain that. But in our case, it's more just like a Marriott. I know that seems like a weird example. People say, "Oh, Marriott hotels, there's so many of them." Marriott only owns a handful of hotels, 3, 4 hotels. They lease the name, and they also they're a management services organization. They manage hotels for Four Points, Hilton, Ritz-Carlton, Sheraton. They just realized you be the infrastructure underneath it. You provide all that software and services and procurement services. And it's a much more capital light, much more cost efficient business. And then the other folks can also get a piece of the pie because they can build a brand. Our partner in Beverly Hills he has authorized me to use his name, is Dr. Jonathan Sykes, super famous plastic surgeon out of Sacramento, but he's in LA too. And he's opening a CloudMedSpa in Beverly Hills, but he's looking in Nashville, Austin, Scottsdale,
Wow.
New York. And yeah, he wants to create a brand. And then potentially be able to monetize that brand, selling it down the road. Just like there are brands on Amazon that sells exclusively on Amazon Marketplace. One of the canonical examples, Anker, Anker. They do battery and other storage.
All the plugs and all that. Yeah.
They're over $1 billion company, and they've only sold on Amazon ever.
Really?
95% of their sales come through Amazon. So I'm just saying it's $1 billion company. Platforms do that, right? You allow people to build their own businesses and profitable ones. And by the way, that's another thing I've learned. I've probably got emphasized to me was, everybody says, well, what's the secret to success? What is the common denominator for your winning CloudMedSpas? Now, we only have 13 or 14, but we have over 100 providers, and I could see there's a commonality to both. Yeah. It's this magic thing called hard work and elbow grease. The people who just expect the money to fall from the sky, somehow it's clear and dry. But the people that work hard, put in the hours, talking to provide, like the CloudMedSpa, we have a guy in Chicago. I just love him. He's so fantastic. He's been in business for less than 60 days. He has talked to 300 or 400 providers on the phone, winnowed it down to 30 or 40 that came by. And in a matter of weeks, he had 10 folks renting from him. That took us 6 to 10 months in Boston. I mean, he just killed it. He's still hungry. He doesn't think he's done well enough. But I'm just like, he put in the elbow grease. And there's other people, oh yeah, I might do some social media. I might do this. I might do that. And sure enough, they have one provider after 5 months, and it's like, hey, this is really simple. You put the work in, you get the people, and by the way, they're successful. So in Boston now, we get 6, 10, 12 providers every month new. We only lose 1 or 2 about each month. So we keep growing, and we haven't spent a dime or done anything because now it's just organic because the community is big enough that they say, hey, have you heard about this CloudMedSpa thing? Oh my God, I do it. Here's what I do. I make money. I make $200-300. And it's nurses who are working 3 shifts are like, this is so much better. I can make more money, work 1/4 of the time, and have my single moms who want to spend time with their kids.
Yeah.
We have a provider down in Texas in Fort Worth. She has I can't mention her name, but she has a child with special needs. And she was like, how do I balance this? Now she's working 2 days a week, making 100,000. It's insane. It's insane that the things you can do and help people, and they get control over their lives. And the owners do well too. The owners do really well if they just keep getting the place full. That's why I tell them, they go, should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? I said, no, just do one thing. Focus your entire life on acquiring providers and retaining them, but acquire. We have the systems in place that unless the place is like stinks or has bad smells or something, if you have a good place and you service them well and spend your time acquiring them, they'll start acquiring themselves. You'll just create a great feedback loop. We had a great provider here in Boston. She moved to Florida and she's looking at opening a CloudMedSpa of her own down in Palm Beach. And we were doing a due diligence thing with her. She's a really bright young woman, and she got her father on, who's an entrepreneur, maybe in finance too. And he was being very tough with me on the numbers. And I used these numbers. Yeah, our providers make $250 an hour. And he was so skeptical. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. That's impossible. His daughter was on the call. She goes, oh, no, Dad, that's what I make. And he was like, you do?
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah. And I said, how much did you spend on marketing? She says, nothing. She says, I've been in retrospect, I should have spent more. It would have come faster.
Yeah.
And that's,
I mean, Iggy, man, I feel like this is something that I think that people are just going to gravitate towards. And I'm thinking about a couple of things because I used to live in like Pasadena for about 5 years, right outside of LA. And one of the things that I saw was a lot of people dropping money on marketing, more so than I saw was happening on the East Coast, right? Like the marketing and people that were able to get into it and do it right, they were able to build. But I saw a lot of people get burned on marketing too. Like they spent a whole bunch of money on Facebook ads and it's like, that was a waste. And it's just money down the drain, which happens in marketing. But I would love for you to, as a way to wrap up, I would love to hear a little bit more about how you guys co-brand together, because it seems like you guys have a nice way to work with your actual partners as well, where you let them have their personal brand or build that while you're building up that real estate space as well.
We're powered by. I mean, there's examples like that by Toast in restaurants. You see it. Intel, powered by Intel with computers. So we're underlying infrastructure. We're powered by CloudMedSpa. That's the network. That's the platform. AWS is a similar thing. You're powered by AWS, but in the end, the front-facing consumer brand is the owner or the providers. It's both. The owner is the WeWork or whatever. I know that's a nasty word these days, but I think there's definitely office sharing companies that are profitable. We want everybody to be able to, again, it's alignment of interest. Everybody can build their business, succeed at it, and then see a little pot of gold at the end of their own rainbow.
That makes a lot of sense, man. And with that being said, too, I think WeWork, I still use them every once in a while. It's a great model, but it didn't have this like underlying like need that I see in this world, right? Everything from the legal, having that scale to actually like rent devices or at least have access to them, which need to do certain treatments. Those are the things where you're like, hey, I can bring my laptop and I'm just pretty much renting out a table in like a cool area. But this is to me a lot more infrastructure.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more. There's a lot more barriers to entry. Trust me.
Yeah. With that being said, again, please tell everyone how to find you if they want to learn more, any other type of like information that you might want to leave them with as well.
You can find us at sales@CloudMedSpas, the plural.com, or info@CloudMedSpas.com, or feel free to reach out to me. I would text me first rather than call me because I'll think it's spam because I don't know your number. But call me, 415-613-2640, 415-613-2640. I love talking to customers or prospective ones. I learn something every time I do, and hopefully they do as well. So, Joe, it was a fantastic pleasure talking to you, man. I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun.
No. Honestly, I think this is one of the more exciting business models I've heard in a while. I just know that it's something that people want to have that independence. They want to be able to do that for themselves. Is there one question or maybe one thought you want to leave the audience with? Anybody that's looking at doing this business model with you or maybe thinking about doing some other things as like an entrepreneur? we're in some crazy, interesting times where there's a ton of opportunity and a lot of confusion at the same time. Any words of wisdom for the audience?
I think the same model can apply to other industries. I mentioned personal trainers to you. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it applies to real estate, but I think if you could create a online version that was really cheap, like a specialized Zoom or something for personal trainers to connect with their providers. So you almost turn a laptop into a tonal or something else. That would be interesting because you have a very direct relationship. The other one I've also thought about now, because you follow private equity, like what is private equity following? They're following skin and derm and aesthetics, but they're also following pets because everybody's spending money on pets. That's exploding. So I think if there's probably a model for this in the pet space. I don't know if it's just your local veterinarian or whether it's specialty hospitals, because specialty hospitals now that would require more capital, but you could probably talk to a capital source. I mean, it's not cheap these days, but if you can put certain very sought after equipment, because there's specialized equipment now for a lot of pets, and put it in there and rent it out, just like they did with MRI centers or surgical centers, but you do it specifically for pets. Pets, honestly, you could put it in a really cheap, probably warehouse-like place, as long as it's safe. Yeah. You're only going there pretty much during the daylight hours, like an office park or something like that, which is pretty remote, doesn't have to be expensive real estate. You put together something like that, and I think even existing veterinary practices would use that and say, I can rent it. I don't have to own it. I don't have to go through the capital expense. That is what a lot of these arbitrages, you call it are, is just a capital expense arbitrage. Instead of everybody buying and building, you just rent, you share. It's the whole theory behind what you call it Uber or Turo or Airbnb, or it's kind of like I have this massive expense, the camping one, RV, you have this massive expense. Why not defray some of the costs of that or earn some income off that CapEx you put in? It's cheaper for every rental cars. Honestly, it's an old one. Rental cars is really just a CapEx arbitrage. Like, I don't want to buy a car every time I go to a new city. Well, I'll rent it to you. Well, you obviously don't pay if you rent for 2 days. You don't pay, 1/10,000th or 1,000th of the cost. You pay more. Or I'd pay 10x that. But it's convenience and simplicity, and same thing with any of these rental models. So there's the needs are growing for this. So those are the ideas I would look to if I wasn't doing what I was doing now.
All right. We're going to have to talk further because I'm definitely going to put your actual details in the actual show notes for the audience. But one of the things I do is also run this actual vet rehab podcast. And I talk to vets all the time. And there's a big thing that happened in private equity where they were going around buying up a lot of these specialty clinics. Yeah. Now, give it 3-5 years on the backside. What they're experiencing is, hey, you know what? I don't like being in corporate. And these people were specialists for a reason, right? And so this model, what you're talking about, is just like no brainer, no brainer, man. Iggy, I can't tell you how much I actually enjoyed this conversation.
Hey, it sounds great, Joe. Listen, you and yours have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy it with the little ones. The time goes by so fast.
Everybody keeps telling me that, but day to day, it feels interesting. I got to tell you,
an old Irish expression, and I'm not Irish, but my kids have Irish names, and it's the days are long, the years are short.
That's a good way to say it. I like that one. Man, Iggy, I want to kind of close on that though, man. I think that's a good way for us to wrap. But I will make sure people will have your details in the episode notes below. So I appreciate you. Hopefully didn't disappoint you. I had a blast talking to him.